You're listening to Agreeable Disagreements with Cameron and Andrew, a podcast where two friends talk about politics, but nice. Although we put on the facade of perfection, we are not perfect. One of us, I won't say who, but their name rhymes with Schmandrew, made a very minor mistake somewhere in this episode. If you can correctly list it in the comments, or send it to us in an email at agreeabledisagreements@gmail.com, you'll possibly win a prize. Anyway, on to the episode.
We have a new co-host who's being uncooperative at the moment.
I hate when our co-hosts are uncooperative.
I know. But everybody, this is Freckles.
Hi, Freckles!
Just get right up in there. I don't know how to move the camera.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, oh well. I am house sitting for my parents. I'm sure they're gonna love me showing you the unfinished floors and everything because they're remodeling their house. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna keep switching.
I was focused on the dog.
Right. I mean, so was I. She's looking at me right now like, what are you doing? Why do you keep calling me over there? But yeah, I'm just going to keep switching recording spaces until I find one that I like. Last time we had the coffee roastery. This time it's someone else's house. So
it's not just someone else's though. It's your parents.
That's true.
You know, it's not like you broke in. That's true as far as I know.
See, I am house sitting. They did not ask me to house sit. They have like a neighbor coming in and I have to go hide in the closet while they're here. But you know, fridge is full of food. And as long as I don't take, too many things out of, each container, I don't think anyone's really going to notice. So,
well, now we have to wait to publish this until after you're home and they can't do anything to you.
They can still do something. That's not how that works.
I guess that's true. Oh, man, I'm sorry. I am admiring my own handiwork. So I got my laptop propped up on a laptop stand that I made a couple years ago that I haven't needed, so I haven't really used it. And now that I've got it in front of me again, I'm like, I didn't do half bad on this thing, considering I didn't have a plan and I just had it in my head and I slung it all together.
Yeah. I have my laptop propped up on what I'm realizing now is a flat rate postal service box that I'm pretty sure I sent my parents coffee in.
Interesting. Yeah, mine is made out of local cherry and walnut. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, do you want to see it?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to mute my mic so I can move it without making that egregious noise.
Oh, no, go ahead and make the egregious noise.
Okay, I'm going to sound distant while we do this, but...
Okay. Just like my father.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, so this is a live edge, local piece of cherry.
Nice.
And I've got it on. The feet are also cherry, and then I've just got this scrap piece of walnut that I had lying around.
Yeah. Did you tell the truth when you got the cherry?
Oh, you're making a reference to that George Washington myth, aren't you? Okay. Yeah. I was sitting here like, what do you mean?
It was a stretch. But it's in my head because I just read a book by one of my favorite authors, A.J. Jacobs. It's called A Year of Living Constitutionally. And he has a whole series of books like this, including one, A Year of Living Biblically. But he spends the entire year living as close to like how the founding fathers intended based on like what's written in the Constitution. So
Okay.
it's hard to explain, but he petitions Congress. He buys a musket and joins a like a reenactment group because at the time every, at least I think, white landowning male was required to have a musket.
Maybe.
And then
I've heard that before. I don't know if it's true.
I mean, that he's a brown educated journalist, so
that doesn't always mean
willing
something. I see. I'm not going to get into that though. Let's keep going. Keep going.
He writes for the New York Times. I think he did his due diligence, especially with a published book.
You'd be surprised some of the stuff that I've seen published by universities that like. I don't have time to go on this tangent.
Okay, sure. But also,
suffice it to say that degrees. I learned in graduate school that degrees mean only so much.
Right, but he's like a very popular author.
There's so many popular people who are popular authors who get stuff wrong. And sometimes
but he's
it's
popular
just like minor...
for like his journalism.
It's like that's not what I meant to say when I said I don't know if it's true. I meant to say like I haven't fact checked it for myself. That's what Why are we doing this? Why are we arguing about something that's not even the topic we decided to argue about?
Yeah, this isn't even the topic. So anyway.
Oh my gosh.
What is our topic?
Keep going. We'll get to that. I remember that. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
My gosh.
Anyway, so he talks about like the pros and cons of originalism. He goes and actually meets with, so he lives in New York, but he was trying to find like a senator who would talk to him about this project, and it just so happens that the senator that was available was Ron Wyden, which is one of Oregon's 2 senators.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, great book. Highly recommend it. And all of his other works.
Speaking about books and things that happened a really long time ago, it's been a while since we recorded, as I said at the beginning. And that's because it's summer, right? You went and did something. I pretended to go out and do something.
Cameron, we can't talk about that. I have to have plausible deniability. I told you that in confidence.
I'm sorry. I thought I saw a body bag in the corner of that Instagram photo you put up. And
it's okay. No one knows where I buried them.
My gosh. Anyway, you went on a trail. You like hiked a couple mountains or something like that, right?
A couple mountains. And if by mountains you mean over an entire mountain range, then yes.
But it was the coastal mountains, right?
Yeah, but it's still
mountains. Still mountains. Yeah.
I still went from one side of a mountain range to the other.
Okay, let me be clear. I'm in Indiana, all right? I grew up out there in Oregon with you. Obviously, we went to high school together. I know what mountains are. But out here, people are like, "Oh my gosh, look at this mountain. It's like 600 feet tall."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think I had more than a 600 feet elevation difference just driving to school sometime, like from where my parents currently live.
So Springfield sits about, I think it's 200 feet higher than Eugene. So if that gives you an idea.
Well, my parents live in Walterville, though.
Yeah, that might be closer to maybe 300. I don't know. Depends on where they live.
I don't care.
And I'm not going to dox them. But anyway, so I did it's called the Corvallis to the Sea Trail. And it's 60 miles from the Benton County Fairgrounds over the coastal range to basically Newport. We only did 45 miles of it because we were meeting up about halfway with my friend's sister. But it was still, still a grueling trek. There's virtually no like flat part of it. It's either up or down. And if you've never gone 45 miles, the down sucks as much as the up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially if you're backpacking stuff in.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. I'll probably do it again next year.
You should fly out here and we can do the Appalachian Trail together.
I'd be down to do that. Actually, one of the friends that I went with, they've done the PCT so far.
Okay.
I think it sounds like they're going to do the Appalachian Trail next, and then after that, they're going to do the Continental Divide Trail.
Wow, that's
yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, they wanted to get the Appalachian Trail out of the way because from what they've heard, it's a lot of like just the same the whole way through. So they thought that it was going to be the more boring one. I'm not sure if I would agree with that.
So people think of the Midwest and think it's flat, but you got to remember that Appalachia is
not in the Midwest.
No, it's like on the border of the Midwest because it's down in southern parts of it go through like Kentucky and Ohio, which are Midwestern states.
Okay,
the mountain ranges go through there, but
it's it's also like West Virginia, and I don't consider West Virginia to be the Midwest.
It's mostly West Virginia and that kind of it's the Appalachian Mountains, but they're pretty rugged. They're not like the Rockies by any means, but they can get pretty rugged up there. I mean, one of my friends at church, I don't know if she was doing the Appalachian Trail or if she was doing another trail closer by, but she planned on doing like a week-long trail hike, and she got 2 days in. And this is someone who is fairly physically fit, more physically fit than I am. And she got 2 days in and was like, nope, no, I'm not ready. And she went back.
Yeah. My roommate, I guess, tried to do the C2C, the Corvallis to the Sea Trail, got halfway through and turned back. And that's nothing compared to the Appalachian Trail.
So the reason, I know some people listening might be like, okay, but Cameron mentioned books. How does that tie in? You asked me for book recommendations for audiobooks before you left, and I'm curious whether or not you actually listened to them.
I did not. So I did.
Of course.
So, hold on. There's a couple things I want to say in my defense. One is that I did buy the is it Brian Sanderson?
Brandon, yeah.
Brandon Sanderson. I did buy the first book in the Mistborn series.
Okay.
I did not listen to it because the entire way I was focused on how much I felt like Frodo. And so I listened to Fellowship of the Ring for like the 8th time.
Was it the Andy Serkis ones?
Yes, and
those are so good.
That's why I justified it, because it was my first time listening to the Andy Serkis version. But then I did again, in my defense, yesterday you suggested another book, and I am now
that's true.
I have like a couple chapters left of that one.
That is true. So I was listening to a book that I would recommend to anyone.
It's a great book.
It's amazing. It's called How Would You Like Your Mammoth? And it's a food history book. And I know it doesn't seem like it would be that interesting, but it really is pretty cool because it doesn't really trace even. It's just a bunch of short, digestible essays that in the audiobook are like 6 to 8 minutes long.
Yeah, they're really short, but like I would consider myself at least an amateur food historian, but it's also like that's a big part of my job. It's something
Yeah,
that
it's
I'm
part of your job. It's
very
part of the
like
degree that you
knowledgeable
study
about.
for.
There's a lot of stuff in there that I had no idea about, and there was a lot of stuff in there that I did know about. That the author really described it in a great way. That I'm probably gonna like steal when I am talking about this kind of stuff with other people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I really like that they not only describe the food, but they also put it in historical context of why that food was cooked the way it was, the ingredients
Yeah.
were chosen for what reasons. And again, it sounds boring, but it's not like they're just saying, well, they decided one morning that they liked pepper. It's like, no, this is the first time that spices were available to people in Europe because of the Columbian Exchange. And so people are experimenting with it, and it didn't always work out.
No, because of the Silk, more or less the Silk Road.
I'm mixing.
That's
I'm
the whole reason that we
things.
had the Columbian Exchange, is to find another route because of the Arab Spice Guild regulations.
Pepper. I should have said peppers.
Chilies.
Well, okay. All peppers and chilies are but they're the same.
They're called peppers. They're called peppers because Columbus thought that's what he had found.
Okay, but capsicums still come from the Americas. They're still part of the Columbian Exchange. Bell peppers?
Yeah, they're not peppers. They're chilies.
Okay. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Either way, point is I misspoke. But it's a great book. It's a great book.
It really is.
My favorite 2 chapters were the Borscht chapter, because
I did like that.
I lived in Poland as a missionary. I got my master's degree focused on Polish history, and it's very heartwarming and home hitting to me to hear that. But also it was just really interesting for stuff that they talked about, because everyone doesn't think about Poland. They think about the rest of Europe, when really at that point in time, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was the crossroads of Europe. Everyone had to cross through it if they wanted to trade. Everyone had to cross through it if they wanted to conquer somebody else. And so they've got all these different influences. And then I also really liked the Nigiri section.
Yeah. So I had known, well, just to go back to the Borscht part. So last year, or might have been the year before that, we had at my church, we threw a Ukraine like benefit concert, and we had like traditional Ukrainian choirs and dancers, and then we also served traditional Ukrainian food. And borscht, from what we know, likely originated in Ukraine, but it's the Ukrainian borscht that I had was much different than the other borshts. Borscht. What is the plural of borscht?
That's gonna be the title of this episode. What is the plural of borscht?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I can tell you what it is in Polish, but I don't know what it is in English.
No, that's okay. But it's very different than I think probably the other borscht that I've had, which is either been Polish or probably Russian.
Yeah, I've had Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian borscht, or as in Polish they call it Borscht, Barszcz. And so what I've noticed is that Russian tends to be a bit more creamy. It's a lot more cream and volume to it. Polish borscht tends to be more soupy, more watery, right? For them, it's basically they've boiled these beets for so long that they've leached all the juices and nutrients out, and then they've seasoned it.
Right.
And sometimes you'll have extra things thrown in there, like chunks of beet or carrot, but it's more focused on the flavor of the borscht itself. And
it's
then
more of
Ukrainian, you could say that. And then Ukrainian is kind of a mix of both. It's not as creamy as Russian. It's not as brothy as Polish. But what I found interesting was a lot of Ukrainian borscht has noodles in it.
Yeah, I don't think ours did, but I think the thing that I found really interesting was that it wasn't super beat forward. And what I
Yeah.
learned from this book is that there was I don't remember the name of the herb that like was the original staple of borscht. But it was because it was basically invented before beets had come from, I want to say it was like Italy that the beets originated.
Yeah, I think
So
they
it was
said that. Yeah.
before, yeah, so it was before that. So I think some of that must have carried over into the Ukrainian, like current day
Mm-hmm.
version. Is that like when we think of borscht, we think of this like super vibrant purple, soup. But it was like there were beets in it, but it wasn't. Beets weren't necessarily the main thing.
So
But
we've talked
it was
about
super delicious.
we've talked about beets. We've got two more things to check off on our list. We've got to talk about bears and
Bears.
Battlestar Galactica.
Well, we tangentially talked about bears because there was, according to Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, increased bear activity in the coastal range as I was hiking there.
So someone just saw you and was like, "Yo, there's a grizzly bear out here."
Yeah.
Because of your beard. It's a
Yeah.
bad joke.
No.
Anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, Battlestar Galactica, we don't have time because
I
I
have
could
never
go
seen
into
that show. I've never seen a single episode. I don't think I've even seen a clip.
I've seen the very first episode of like the newest one with where James Olmos and
I don't know who that is.
he played Jaime Escalante, the teacher in Stand and Deliver.
I didn't watch that.
Seriously? You're a teacher and
Maybe.
you don't know Stand and Deliver?
Wait, is that the one with Hilary Swank?
No, that's Freedom Riders.
Oh. Okay, I've seen that one.
Same kind of category of movie.
I've seen clips from Stand and Deliver.
Yeah.
Now that I'm seeing pictures of it. I haven't seen the movie, though.
It's a great movie. It's one of my favorites. And I'm not just saying that because my mom was a math teacher, like Jaime Escalante, who died because his insurance wouldn't cover his cancer medication. That's it for another episode. Where was I going with this?
I don't know, man.
Oh, I have seen
Battlestar
quite a bit
Galactica?
of. Yeah, I have seen quite a bit of the 70s version because it was one of my dad's favorite shows.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, the whole point of this discussion was originally you should read the book, How Would You Like Your Mammoth? It's very good, and it's pretty short. And I am planning on using several chapters in my classes next year because I've got to teach about Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, and there's things in that book about Mesopotamia and Egypt, some of the stuff that they would eat. I've got to talk about prehistory American cultures. So, the people who came across the land bridge. So I'm going to use the first chapter where it talks about mammoth, Yeah. And I think it's really well done. Even if you don't like history, it's written in a easy enough way that it's very accessible. I know a lot of history books, academics get so bogged down in trying to sound academic, and this is not one of those books. This is a book that is written for the general public, and it's great.
Right. It's written for the general public, but somebody who is very, heavily involved, at least more than the average person.
Yeah, she's a German history professor. Matter.
Yeah, it's written really well for both the layman and the quote unquote initiated. But we do have a topic for this episode.
Yeah, speaking of history, something happened recently for the first time in American history.
Two things happened.
I was kind of lobbing them into one because they're so similar.
I would say 34 plus a few
13, because it was 13 for...
Was it really 13?
I think so. Let me double check that.
Okay.
Let me see. Maybe it was just 4. I don't know. I don't actually know now.
Still, I think the 34 things, the first 34 things are the more unprecedented. unprecedented things.
You suck.
It was right there. I had to.
Oh my gosh. So we're talking about the convictions that both President Trump and Hunter Biden received in some recent court cases.
Yeah.
And who do you want to start with? Let's do Trump first. Let's do chronological, because I also think there are some narrative things that Trump has been pushing that potentially I'm not sure I'm convinced either way, but some narratives that Trump has been pushing which potentially get what's the word? Discouraged? No, discounted because of Hunter's conviction. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yes.
And we can talk about that.
Okay. No,
I think
I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what I want to start off by saying is that this was truly a jury of his peers. And the whole narrative around that this was rigged is completely false in this case. It is not false in other cases like this.
Sure.
But if anyone has if historically white wealthy businessmen are the people who the system is rigged in favor for. So I feel like the fact that it was unanimous from a jury that was duly selected by both the defendant and the prosecution. I mean, it's I think pretty clear that he was legitimately found to be guilty by this jury.
Was it unanimous?
Now there's others. Oh yeah, within 2 hours.
That doesn't necessarily mean it was that doesn't mean it was unanimous.
It had to be unanimous. Otherwise it would have been a hung jury. If one of the jurors had held out, then he would have been on any of the charges. Had any of the jurors not said guilty, then it would have been a hung jury for at least that charge. But all 34 charges got all, I think it was 12 members of the jury within 2 hours, which is extraordinarily short.
I don't know that it was 2, because I'm seeing several hours.
It was maybe I think the Trump one was, I think, 3. Hunter Biden was 2 hours.
Okay. And I'm seeing USA Today that says, hold on. I misread the headline. Hold on. Okay. Because I don't know enough about law, I'll be honest with you, to say that this had to be unanimous or not.
It did.
And I know...
It did.
Okay, it was unanimous, though. I'm seeing USA Today. Each guilty verdict was unanimous and had to be, contrary to what social media users said. Okay, because I know that there was some rumors going around that the judge said, you don't have to be unanimous, you can have 4 people per count, and I remember thinking, okay, that's kind of suspicious. And
I mean, you can, but he's not going to be convicted of those crimes if it wasn't unanimous.
Right. And so my rule with anything I see on the internet is if it sounds too ridiculous to be true, it's probably not true. And so I remember seeing that and being like, a judge who has been saying you only need 4 votes on an entire jury for each count to be considered guilty, that doesn't sound right.
I mean, judges do give a an opinion to the jury.
Yes, but no judge is going to say you don't need to have a majority to convict.
Yeah, they will.
A judge is going to say you don't need to have a majority?
Yeah. That's part of his instructions to the jury, is to tell the jury, like, here's the structure of this.
I would have thought that no matter what, juries would have to have a majority opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what I'm saying.
Okay. I was misunderstanding what you were saying.
Because the rumor was, the judge said, you only need 4 people to vote in favor of convicting. Right. And the jury is typically 12. So I'm sitting here thinking, you only need a 1/3. Yeah, 1/3
that
group of people.
I don't think that would make sense.
Right. And so I know a lot of people who are going, oh, this is rigged because the judge said you only need 4 people, and that's not true. That didn't happen. Right. The judge didn't say that. Now, some things that are true that I think are, I don't want to say fishy, but will definitely make it worth appealing for Trump's legal team and for Trump.
Right.
Is the fact that the statute of limitations the laws were altered. And you could argue that it was, New York altered.
I had not heard about.
New York altered their statute of limitations laws around the same time that the case was brought or the case was happening. Now, again, Some people are saying, well, they altered it just so they could bring it to court, and that's not true. When you actually look at when they were altered, it couldn't have been the case. Right. However, Trump was already in the spotlight, and people were already trying to take him to court for things, and then that's when they
but that's made the true since like the mid-'80s. If you're looking at when Trump wasn't in a legal suit, you have to go back pretty far.
Yeah. I guess what I think is there's a number of things that make the trial a little bit, not very sketchy, but just a little bit sketchy. And because of how social media works today, people run with that inch
just what
for an entire marathon.
Yeah.
And so I know that people are saying, well, they changed the statute of limitations, and they did. They did change the law regarding how long the statute of limitations were, and that did qualify Trump's case to actually be brought to court when it previously would not have been.
Sure.
But people are saying that they used that. Go ahead.
I did not expect that to be your first objection.
Well, it's only partially an objection, because on one hand, when you actually look at when the statute of limitations law was changed, it was before this was even brought into court. It was, I think, even around the same time that this would have been happening is when they started that legislation. And so it's not something that was made to target Trump, like a lot of people are saying. At least not for this particular case. I think you could make an argument that people knew Trump was going to be litigated, and so they changed their laws hoping that something could be dug up. I don't know if that holds water, but I think that's an argument people can make.
I think think back to 2016.
Mm-hmm.
No one seriously thought that Trump was going to win.
Right.
Like until he actually did. And then like stuff got real. And I was going to use a different word than stuff, but that is a mistake I see a lot of my fellow liberals making this time around, but I'm not counting my chickens before they've hatched. Anything is possible.
It really is.
Why it's important for everybody to vote. But anyway,
so let me ask you this question then. Do you think this conviction, I want to hear it from you, because I have my own thoughts and I know what a lot of my friends who are conservative think. Do you think this helps or hinders Trump's re-election campaign?
I really don't know. I could go either way. I've heard from other friends who are conservatives who, at the around the time that Haley dropped out of the race, were like, well, I don't like Trump. but I'm not going to vote for Biden, and I'm not going to throw away my vote, which is unfortunately what you're doing if you vote for a third party. But I've also heard like a lot of people who are just doubling down because they're buying into, the witch hunt, which a comedian said this. I don't remember which comedian it was, but the important thing to remember about witch hunts and why they were so awful is because witches don't exist. So a witch hunt is, by definition, a wild goose chase for a mythical creature. And that's why they were so awful. There absolutely are con men, politicians who pay off porn stars to defraud the American people into voting for him 34 times. So I think just the whole term witch hunt is that's the real hoax.
Now
What was your question?
My question was, do you think this helps or hurts his campaign?
I don't know. I can see ways that it would help. I can see ways that it would hurt.
I am 100% convinced that it helps.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Are you still going to vote for Trump?
I was never convinced to do it in the first place.
You said when Haley dropped out that... Okay,
I said I might have to, but then we have RFK.
Oh, God.
Who...
He's the brainworm, though. The brainworm.
You mean Shai Hulud? The spice must flow.
I mean, and look, I'm talking as one victim of a parasite to another, or about another.
About another, because I'm like, I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
And it's
as
not
far
that
as you know.
Look, here's the thing.
When was the last time you got your brain scanned?
Never.
Well,
anyway. So I feel like I'm stuck with three terrible choices. All right?
Yeah.
Because I've got Biden, who I genuinely, one, I don't really care for much of his policies. Two,
sure.
I think he is way too old and verging on senile.
Trump was falling asleep in court. Did you see?
Hold on.
Did you also see his...
You haven't let me get to what I was going to say about Trump yet.
Okay.
Then we have Trump, who is also too old, and I think verging on senile. And
not verging, fully senile.
Man, I think if we're going to question whether or not Biden is senile, we should also question whether or not Trump is.
I think he's a loose cannon, but he's always been a loose cannon. I don't think he's senile. He's not a great orator. That's all.
It has nothing to do with his oration. It has to do with, it has partially to do with his oration. It also has to do with how he'll just stand there and go off into nothing. He just did that at a D-Day thing. And I'm not talking about where everyone thinks he pooped his pants. I mean, like, you can see where people are, because I know he wasn't doing that. You can see him reach for the chair.
Trump, whose aides have gone on record saying Trump shits his pants regularly.
His aides who had reasons to lie about him because they didn't like him anymore. Anyway,
also
that's not
Secret
the point.
Service agents. It's been verified on multiple fronts.
Just because people say it doesn't mean it happened, right? I'm a history teacher. There's tons of stuff people say happened that didn't happen.
If like my delivery driver or one of the baristas told somebody, like if multiple people that I work with told other people on the record that I regularly shit my pants in their presence, I would believe it.
Okay, but you've also got all these terribly huge hoaxes and frauds that involved hundreds of people, which came out later as untrue. I'm also very good at hiding
when I shit my pants.
Okay. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is Biden, don't like his policies. I think he's old and verging on senile. Trump, I only like some of his policies. I also think he's old and senile. Then we've got RFK, who I like a good amount of his policies, but
definitely
he's old
senile.
And he's weird.
It's definitely senile.
No, here's the thing. I think he is the least senile of the three.
That's absolutely not true.
No. Listen. I think, and this is going to be a hot take, I think RFK is the most coherent of the three. I just think he's crazy. And I think crazy and senile are two different things. I don't think he's losing his capacity to talk. I don't think RFK's losing his capacity to like hold a conversation, which I think both Trump and Biden are. I think RFK just believes some wacky crap and is totally fine telling you about it.
Okay, so he's more charismatic. I'll give you that. But I feel like a lot of the narrative around Biden being senile is confirmed to be Russian propaganda. That's not the entirety of it, but it has been confirmed that has been a
Where are you seeing that confirmation?
From the I believe it was the CIA and the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay,
that is a known tactic that Russia has been attempting since
but you've also
the 2020 election.
You've also got United States people, like the guy who, like the person who interviewed Biden about his documents and said we're not going to take him to court because he's so because people will say he's a senile old man or he's a nice old man and they won't,
No, he said that any legal like attack on him would not do well in court because Biden's legal team would be able to use him being a well-meaning old man.
What I'm saying
says
is
nothing about whether Biden is just a well-meaning but feeble old man.
Here's what I'm saying. I think I have seen plenty of videos and plenty of one-on-one interviews where even in context, you've got times where Biden is very coherent and times where he says some really good, clear things and he makes some great points. And then you've got times where he says random stuff about his uncle being eaten by cannibals. And then you've got Trump, who at times has some really... Hold on. You've got Trump, who also at some times makes some really solid points and can speak very clearly, and at other times goes off on how his podium is shaky and that we should tear the entire place down for no reason. I think if we're going to say that Trump is losing his mind...
Trump and RFK are on that same level as Biden?
I'm saying all three of them.
That you're seeing it equally?
Yes, I am.
That you're seeing it equally across the board?
Actually, no, I'm not, because I think RFK is less than the other two.
That's scary.
I think it absolutely does help his campaign. Because
I think it helps with the people that were already going to vote for him.
There's a number of people who were already convinced, and I'm not going to say I agree with this rhetoric or narrative, but there were a number of people who were already convinced that this and the other trials that he's facing are a target of the Democratic National Committee, that all of this is just a party-wide effort.
How would they be, though?
So hold on. A lot of people are saying, and again, I don't agree with this, but a lot of people are saying that these trials were a target of Trump by the Democratic Party because you've got laws that were changed suspiciously. And when you look at it, it's not really suspicious, but you know, when you look at it just quickly and you're saying, oh, well, they changed the statute of limitations and now he's in court. I think
that's pure confirmation bias.
Some of it is. Some of it absolutely is. But the thing is, you've got a lot of these people who are saying, well, I'm on the fence about Trump or Biden, but I'm seeing the left attack Trump in a lot of ways, and I'm not going to say it's a fair criticism, but I see a lot of people saying, I see the left attacking Trump in a lot of ways that the right isn't attacking the left. And I'll disagree with that. I will disagree with that too. Just telling you what.
Okay.
I'm just telling you what I'm seeing. This is not what I think.
Right.
I'm telling you what I'm seeing.
This is other people's opinion, not your opinion.
Exactly.
Because you and I both know that the right is doing that and more in terms of attacking the left.
as someone who likes to at least think of himself as fairly moderate, I think it's just a slogfest on both sides. But that's aside the point. That's aside the point. I think you have a lot of people who are on the fence about Trump, but are scared of what the left is trying to do in a lot of ways. You look at things like cancel culture and the way that a lot of like social justice is going. And you can agree with it or not, but a lot of people view it as targeting opinions that are different from theirs. And
right.
And so they see this as a confirmation of that and say, well, now I need to stand up for different opinions. I need to stand up for different stances. So I'm going to vote for Trump because I see this as because we see this as a attack on views. Yeah. And again, I don't agree with that.
Here's the difference though. First of all, cancel culture at its essence is just consequences. There are people who have been canceled, like Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby.
Sure.
That's why they're in jail, because they did commit heinous crimes. There are other people who have been canceled, like Dave Chappelle, who I think has like 3 different stand-up specials coming out. So what exactly got canceled? And that's, I feel like, the majority of the people that are like, well, I got canceled. It's like, okay, but you're not losing any money. You're just like, people are just talking shit about you because you said something awful or you did something awful. And so that's why, like, this is not cancel culture. This is Trump broke 34 laws. And now this is how the judicial system works. So it's not an attack by the left. It's the judicial system doing what it should do.
I agree, but I want to be hesitant in comparing how cancel culture, for lack of a better term, has treated people, because there are people like Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby who absolutely deserve it. But then there's people like Jimmy Carr and,
Jimmy Carr has not been canceled. He will be the first one to. He will be the first one to tell you that he has not been canceled.
Are you kidding me?
2 weeks ago, he came out with a new Netflix special.
Hold on. I thought he said in that Netflix special that he had. Okay, so hold on. Let me get this straight. I know he
made fun of cancel culture.
Yes, but I thought he made fun of it because he's been canceled. But it might be, now that I'm remembering it, he might be saying, in case I do. Either way, Dave Chappelle and Harvey Weinstein should not be compared with cancel culture.
No,
because Harvey Weinstein did some terrible things and did things that are, suable, did things that are breaking laws. Dave Chappelle said stuff that people didn't like. And
then went on, like, shortly after to host SNL.
Sure.
So cancel culture is not, no one's being canceled. They're not being stopped from doing stuff. It's just they're getting the feedback that they should for having bad opinions.
So
or doing bad things. That's not cancel culture. That's just consequences.
I understand your argument, but I think it's a dangerous precipice to take that stance. Because
what is the danger?
Because that means you have to draw a line somewhere on what qualifies as a bad opinion. And I think there are some things that we can all unanimously agree on as being bad opinions, like racist opinions. But I think there are some things that are more borderline gray that people will say,
I would disagree with that. I think transphobic opinions, like Dave Chappelle had, are inexcusable. But
were they opinions or were they jokes?
They were. It doesn't matter if they're jokes or opinions.
I think it does.
It does, but also doesn't.
Here's the thing. And I think you've mentioned this before too. The whole idea of the canary in the cave in the mine shaft, right? Where comedians are often, especially when you look through history, people who say silly things, people who say critical things, are the first ones to go. And when you've got people whose job it is to make jokes that nobody should take seriously, that everybody knows it's your job to say stuff we shouldn't take seriously, it's your job to say stuff you don't mean, and we start attacking those people for saying things that they may or may not mean when it's their job to do that, then
right, but
I think that's a problem.
But there's the idea of punching up and punching down. Jimmy
Sure.
Carr says some truly awful things, but they are hilarious because the joke is not about a disenfranchised group. It is about the system that has made them disenfranchised.
Sometimes it absolutely is about disenfranchised groups. He's made tons of jokes about, surprise penises and stuff.
Sure. Those jokes aren't denying the identity. And I'm not going to say that Jimmy Carr, like 100% of his jokes are great and that they're all punching up to systems of oppression, but some work, some don't. The difference is that Dave Chappelle was saying something that was at the expense. It was more laughing at rather than laughing with a marginalized group of people, and also if it was a joke, it wasn't funny at all.
See, and
if you want to use the defense that it's a joke, it better be fucking funny.
So here's the thing. I think if we're gonna get on people like Dave Chappelle, then we should also get on people like Dane Cook. We should also get on people we should also get on people like Dana Carvey. We should also get on people, who it means that, but soon you're going to run out of people to get on, right?
You're not. There are reasons why Dane Cook is not popular anymore. And I mean, part of that has to do with his weird, like extremely young wife. Dana Carvey, I think, has just not really done a whole lot, but also may have some bad opinions. But I mean, there's a reason why there are still comedians around who say controversial things, but don't have this issue. Jon Stewart, for example.
Okay, but also Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais makes fun of the trans community all the time.
Yeah, and the things that he said were shitty. Ricky Gervais is doing great in his career.
Here's what I'm noticing the difference, though. What I'm noticing the difference is less about whether or not people are actually getting canceled. It's about how severe whatever they did that they're getting canceled over is, and two, their own reaction to it, right? Because you've got some people who, like, like Kevin Spacey, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Egregious misconduct, and their carears are ruined. But they also...
Kevin Spacey has a new show coming out. Or a new movie.
Spacey just talked about how he's bankrupt and has no money left to his name in an interview. He's
still working. Also, he did some pretty inappropriate things with a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah, no, that's why. And I agree. Good. But then we've got people like Dave Chappelle, who you could... I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say he said nice things, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that he... comedians don't always say nice things. I hear people who don't say nice things all the time. But he didn't give into it at the same time. You've got other celebrities who have been canceled who have been like, you're absolutely right. And they lean into it, and then they kind of just peter out. And either they are not heard of for quite a while, or they pop back up 5-6 years later. Whereas Dave Chappelle was just like, I don't care, and just kept going through it. And I think that's...
honestly, I think the problem with Dave Chappelle is that what he said wasn't funny. Dave Chappelle is a viciously funny person who happens to have some shitty opinions. And what he was saying when he was expressing those opinions just wasn't funny. So that's not necessarily cancel culture. That was him just being bad at his job. J.K. Rowling, has doubled down on her bad opinions, and I think probably will see, some financial loss from that. But also, I think she's going to be just fine.
I also think, well, some things have been canceled because of things that she said.
Like, what has been canceled?
There were several projects that were delayed. Like the Fantastic Beasts franchise. Fantastic Beasts franchise has been shut down, not only because of the stuff going on with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, but also because of her own opinions. And a lot of that controversy has driven a lot of people to not watch those movies. And now we're not going to get the finish to the series. And, so that is one example.
Also, the series was objectively bad by the third movie.
I loved it. I really liked it.
I really enjoy them. I enjoy the movies. I've watched them multiple times recently, but they don't do well for how high production they are. And I think that has more to do with it. Also, the atrocious just plot line and everything of the cursed child. I think we've just kind of wrung this thing dry. And there's not a whole lot, like, it's, diminishing returns. I will say,
back,
sorry.
We
should have another episode on Harry Potter.
Maybe we can do that next time. But to kind of bring it back to the original issue of whether or not this helps Trump's campaign. Oh my gosh, we got so far sidetracked. Holy cow. Anyway, all of that is to say, whether you believe in cancel culture or not, a lot of people do. And a lot of people will see this as an example of the left just trying to cancel someone into non-existence, for lack of a better term. I know it's not exactly non-existence, but proverbial.
For 34 crimes of a jury of his peers, duly selected by his representation and the representation of the people opposing him.
That is something that a lot of people forget.
For things that other people go to jail for all the time. And historically, white men go to jail for it less.
True. And I will say that a lot of people say, well, the jury was rigged, and they forget that his lawyer had just as much say. When I went to jury duty last year before that, they told us if either one of the lawyers doesn't want you on the jury, you'll be removed. Both lawyers have to agree on both. So people forget that. People forget that Trump's representation had to agree with everybody on that jury. What I do think is
certain allowances for just dismissing, like some of them, depending on, I think, the trial or something, or the case, some of them, like, you have to have a reason to dismiss this person. Like, oh, this person, like, is acquainted with the defendant, so obviously they can't be on there. But they also, a lot of times, just get, like, a certain number of those dismissals that they can, like, use for whatever reason.
But
so it's not always that they're stuck with people that aren't perfect, but they can't really find a good reason to dismiss them. Like, they're allowed to dismiss people for just like, I don't think this person's gonna help me win the case.
And another thing, though, that another reason I think this is going to help him is because the left is saying 34 counts, 34 crimes, and that's absolutely true. But when you look at what the crimes are, they're not terrible. I mean, because
I think they are, and I think that's the thing that I wanted to bring up, which is normally these would be misdemeanors, but they're felonies because the district attorney, I think, made the case that this was done not just to keep Stormy Daniels quiet. It was done specifically to influence the presidential election, which is election fraud. And while I do, the only bit of ground I will give to the people who don't like how this trial ended was that there is a case to be made for Trump getting convicted of a separate crime that he was never litigated over necessarily, which is the election fraud part. But because that is part of the context for these trials, being that they were felonies because they were only felonies because it was under the umbrella of basically election fraud.
But
that still factors in.
let's also be clear that this is a case where, had it come out of his personal pocket, it probably would not have been as big a deal. The crimes themselves are not that he paid her. The crimes are that he did it through a business and covered up in official business documents. So if one of two things had changed, either it came out of his personal pocket or he had labeled it hush money, then it wouldn't have necessarily been either a crime or as bad of a crime.
So the thing that makes it a crime, so the thing that, from my understanding, the thing that initially makes it a crime is the misuse of business funds.
Sure.
The thing that makes it a felony, though, is the cover-up.
So if he had just given her the money out of his own pocket, this wouldn't have been an issue, is what I'm understanding from you and from the articles I've read.
From what I understand, it may still have been an issue in terms of
ethics,
tampering with an election, which is a felony. That's part of like the convictions that just happened. But they wouldn't have been able to bring the case because it was misuse of business funds. They still might have been able to litigate him over, tampering with an election, because essentially what he was doing was using his power and privilege and wealth to keep information that the American people should maybe know about, that definitely would have affected how they voted, to keep somebody quiet, which is, and to buy up a news story, like pay off journalists so that they wouldn't write stories about this, which is a very common practice. Throughout media.
And so
don't
get me started on FDR.
I'd be surprised to hear of any politician that didn't do that. But to me, the problem is not so much that he paid off a porn star. He's Trump. Of course he's going to pay off a porn star. The issue to me is that he did it to lie to his electorate. So it makes me pretty frustrated that the people that he lied to are now like coming to his defense.
I agree that that's pretty ironic, right? That because he's not trying to lie to Democrats about this. He was at the time at least trying to lie to his base group, which are fairly conservative, fairly religious people who would in no way stand for that in most people's lives. But here's the thing. I have found, and again, this is another thing I don't know that I agree with, I have found that a lot of people are willing to overlook his personal life in favor of his particular policies because policy is so important to them.
I've found that they're willing to overlook almost anything just for the sake that he is Donald Trump.
But
doesn't have anything to do with his policies, because he doesn't really have any policies. Doesn't have to do with his personal life, because his personal life is objectively horrible.
Oh, he's got several policies.
Several policies. Several.
No, here's the thing. His policies that are really resonating with his base are all about taxes and economy, as well as America first. Right?
That are founded on fallacies. The economy was not better due to his policy decisions.
It depends on what data set.
Maybe during his presidency.
It depends on what data set and what data markers you're using, because when you look at,
I'm using the ones that are actually true, not the ones that Fox News is using. Which is another important part of that.
Here's the thing, though. Biden is using a lot of part-time jobs to inflate his unemployment record, which haven't been counted traditionally in the past. We see, and it's not just. I mean, we there's three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Right? That's a Mark Twain quote. And you can make, I love statistics because it's fun to look at some things, but you can also I hate them because you can make them and bend them and twist them to be whatever you want. And so
if you don't understand how statistics work
no,
and
even
margin
if
of
you do,
errors and bootstrapping and
even
all of
if
this
you
stuff.
do,
Okay, but
arguably, if you do, then you can manipulate it better for people who don't.
but it's really easy if you have just a basic understanding to understand, like, okay, this person used mode instead of median, or this
Sure.
person used 25 samples and then bootstrapped it to make it look like it was, 4,000. That's obviously sketchy. Or this person just used flawed, methodology.
It's just
that
as
requires
sketchy as
very little understanding.
But it's just as sketchy as changing the definition of recession so that you can say that you're not in a recession.
Right, but one of those is peer reviewed.
Okay, but peer reviewed by who? People you choose to review it, and not all of not all the peers
that's not
agreed.
what peer review means. Yeah, no, peer reviewed means that other, like, it's been put out there for your peers to review. They've reviewed it. They've reviewed your sources, and they've come back and said, okay, like, there's an issue here, or I didn't find any issues.
See, but part of the problem, you
peer review is the way that we make sure that things are factually true. And it works for every single, like, actually scientific or just academic. I know that you know this.
I also know that we used to have peer-reviewed data that said smoking tobacco was healthy for you. Then it was backed by the Surgeon General.
But we also know. I mean, we also know that was a lot, like, very far in the past, when the whole idea of peer review wasn't necessarily a thing, and that's why we have the system that we have now. Also, we know that even after the scientific community said that actually, no, that's wrong, Philip Morris still kept saying that, and that's why we now also have different laws about what you can and can't claim on packaging. That's why we have a Surgeon General's warning. So using that example from 70 years ago doesn't count today, because that's why we have the way that we have today.
But the point I'm trying to make is, when you look at something that's peer reviewed, you have to look at who those peers that are reviewing it, because, just as much as I can pick and choose what data sets to use, I can pick and choose people that I want to back stuff up. I mean, how many things have been backed by the big oil industry or the pharmaceutical companies that we've come out and been like, oh, actually, even though the data was peer reviewed, it was peer reviewed by people who were funded by certain organizations, and now we have to go back and backtrack.
I think you're conflating two different things. You're conflating two different things. It is absolutely possible within peer-reviewed, article to leave out certain information and just focus on one thing, where the media, which is the big problem, the media will conflate that with a totally erroneous claim. What is virtually impossible to do under peer review, system, is to say things that are false or that don't have evidence to substantially back them up. That is way different than the media reading the abstract or just the conclusion of a peer-reviewed paper and then making a totally erroneous headline, which I think is more what you're talking about.
I can see what you're saying. I still think what I'm trying to get at is a little bit different, right? The idea that you not only have to take into account who's saying it, but also who's reviewing it and where are they coming from, because...
But you don't have to take... I mean, you do have to take into account who's reviewing it, but that's why peer review exists.
Sure, but
because it's reviewed by anyone. It's not just being reviewed by people that are going to agree with you, but also you're not allowed to make a statement, especially a affirmative statement, without being able to show empirically or not empirically, definitively, that that the data supports that. And even then, you don't say we've confirmed this. What you say in the language of like your research is we have failed to deny the null hypothesis, which is like the like it's a double negative basically.
Yeah.
But even then, like you're not allowed to say stuff that is just not true in peer review.
To an extent.
That's the way that... No, not to an extent.
Because, listen. Because it's not just peer review that counts here, right? It's also perception, right? And...
Right, but that's why we have peer review, is because perception is subjective, and whether something is true or not found to be false, in other words, true, that is not subjective.
Can't be proven.
Or can't be proven to not like the it's a dichotomy though.
But what I'm saying is
you can show that something is false, or you haven't found sufficient evidence to show that it's false, and therefore might likely be true.
See, but there's...
unless further data is evaluated.
But we're not talking about a term like what counts as a carcinogen. We're talking about a highly politicized term like recession, where, one, not every organization agrees on what recession means. If you look at Fidelity, right, Vanguard, Pew, they're all going to have slightly or sometimes drastically different definitions of what recession qualifies as. And when we say that, let's be clear, when we say that Biden administration changed the definition of recession, all they did was change the government's definition of recession. They didn't change the worldwide definition.
That was Biden. I don't think that was Biden that did that. I think that was an independent organization who advised, or who independently made a new definition, and the Biden administration ran with it.
So we've been talking a lot about this Trump stuff. Let's talk about the Hunter Biden one, because I think it's equally important, because this whole narrative that people were saying of, oh, it's just the left trying to come after Trump, is largely discounted by the fact that Hunter Biden was also convicted of crimes around the same time.
Right. Yeah. Which I agree are also crimes. But what I think is interesting is the crimes that he's convicted of, and the people that are like really happy that he is convicted of these, are the things that they've been fighting to maintain for last 50 years.
Yeah.
Which is
gun
anyone
rights.
Can buy a gun at any time.
Yeah.
So
here's the thing. I think we've got
interesting how
I think we've got two similar cases filled with irony here. One where if they had just done something slightly different, or if the laws had been slightly altered as people have been trying to alter them, then both of these wouldn't have been nearly as huge a deal. If we've also got people who are happy that the other person got convicted, but don't care that their person got convicted. And we've got people who are, doing the same thing on their side, but are mad that the other side's getting away with it, or are mad that they aren't getting away with it when the other side is. I think it's the difference here is that one of these people is a former president and running for office, and one of these people is the child of the sitting president and is not running for office.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, there may be some weaponization of like charges against Trump. I'm not going to sit here and say Judge Marchand was totally unbiased, especially not after all of the, violations of gag orders that Trump just could not seem to.
But did you also see the recent call for a review by the judge, because some of the jury members were allegedly talking about the case outside of the courtroom?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and
that
posting on
wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
and posting on social media about it. Now, I don't know if they can confirm that or if they have confirmed if like the Facebook comments or things were from people actually connected to the case, but they might have to declare a mistrial and redo it because of that, you know?
Yeah. But Judge Marchand is not, I don't think he was a fan of Trump,
I don't
but
think anybody
also
on
I
the
don't
jury
think that
was
that
either.
matters. No, I mean, there were people that said that they at least voted for him the first time. There are people who may vote for him still. And I mean, there's definitely people that are conservative that, they watch Fox News regularly. But regardless of that, like, I mean, it's not as if bias was totally like that. There wasn't any bias in this case. It's just, it's still in keeping with the normal amount of bias that's in any case in the, judicial system.
Sure.
What I will say is I do think that the same is not true with Hunter Biden, because I know that they're like, it especially depends on what his sentencing is. I think if he gets any jail time, that's definitely adds I'm not going to say that I will say that it's weaponized, but it adds credence to the the theory that this is weaponization of the judicial system. But the fact of the matter is that if Hunter Biden knowingly lied on his background check or whatever the forms were to buy this Colt Cobra, that's a crime. If he was a drug user,
Right.
that's a crime. There should be consequences for that. But it's also a crime that a lot of people get away with all the time.
Yeah.
And they get away with that because of the laws that the NRA and far right Republicans fight to keep around. And the only reason why Hunter Biden isn't getting away with it is because of his dad, which is why I have a lot of respect for Biden saying, no, I'm not going to pardon him.
Yeah.
Because that's a tough choice.
It is. But you also have to put yourself in Biden's shoes, where if he doesn't pardon him, then it's, oh my gosh, Dad, what have you done to me? But if he does pardon him, then it's setting a terrible precedent. And I think that's what he's taken. And I'll say that I respect that.
But it's a precedent
really do.
that Trump would absolutely get away with.
Probably. I'll say probably.
If Eric did the same thing, Trump would pardon him. Actually, no, I'm not going to say that because Trump doesn't give a shit about Eric. If Ivanka did the same thing, Trump would pardon her.
Maybe.
Hands down, Trump
I don't
would
know.
pardon her.
I mean, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, then every day would be Ota Donkfest. That's our second Office reference of the day. But
okay.
I mean, it's easy to sit here and play the what if game because we ultimately don't know. Maybe Trump would say, I'm not going to pardon because of the same precedent. What I think is the bigger issue here is this whole idea of whether or not the court system is being weaponized is a very important discussion to have, because if it is weaponized against either side, it sets a extremely dangerous precedent that can move forward in the worst imaginable way. Because what it means is, let's say that Biden weaponized.
I disagree with that.
Oh, let me explain, because I think that, let's just say, again, I don't think this is what's happening, but let's just say that the Biden administration, the Democratic National Committee, has leveraged the court system somehow to attack Trump. Well, that just means that when Trump's in charge, he can do the same thing to leverage against the left. And the problem you're going to come into is, and this is something that we have seen historically in countries where a single party has gathered enough power to leverage and has leveraged the court systems, is that whoever's in power litigates their opposition into submission, into a point where they can't do anything anymore. And if the Biden administration is doing that, which I'm not saying they are, But if they are doing that, then that sets a dangerous precedent for this election if Trump does win. And if Trump's doing that too, then that sets a dangerous precedent for the other side moving forward. Because if you can just use the courts to tie up people in the court system for, and you're specifically using that to target your political opposition, then what you come down to is, the path to dictatorship. Every dictatorship has started and maintained their power by leveraging the court systems. Now, that being said, the balance of this is we have to hold people accountable, especially our leadership. So it's a tricky game to play.
That's actually where I am disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with people need to be held accountable. I am so sorry for the whining.
Oh, it's fine. It's your dog. Dogs are cute. I like it. My dogs are sitting here at my feet sleeping, so you're fine.
So I'm not going to say that these cases aren't both a weaponization of the judicial system. But what I do think is that there are also examples of the judicial system working how it should. And the only reason it's a weaponization is because that's not normally how the judicial system works, which is in itself a problem.
Okay.
There are lots of people who commit the same crimes as either one of them and get less harsh treatment or harsher treatment. And it's specifically because of who both of these defendants are that it seems like everything is being like doubly sure that it's being done by the book.
Sure.
And that may include the book being thrown at them, but it's still the book,
Well, let's be clear. I don't think either one of them is going to see a day of jail time. I really don't. I
don't think so either.
Hunter stands a higher chance of it too, just because he has prior convictions he's got a better record.
He's also got the New York tax fraud case.
Yeah. So I think because
he might get for that, but
right. Well, and just on the grounds that he's got a record where he's, he has had problems with the law before. Trump doesn't. He's been brought to court cases, yes, but as far as convictions go, this is the first thing he's really been convicted of. Now, again,
but you're also not allowed. You're not allowed to take into account past charges unless there are convictions. You're not allowed, but
Well, just because you're not allowed doesn't mean you don't subconsciously or just don't quietly do it. But
yeah,
on paper, Trump has a clean record. And because of that...
Clean criminal record.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Civil lawsuits? Absolutely not.
Right, but they're only looking at criminal records for this because it's a criminal trial. And so...
But you have to take into account the fact that he has the privilege of a wealthy white man.
True. And I think that...
Sorry, that reminded me of something else that I want to bring up about his appeal case.
Which I was just going to say. This is a good segue into that then. I think both of them are probably going to appeal. I don't see it working out well for Hunter Biden. I do see Trump's case...
I doubt it.
I do see Trump's case successfully appealing.
Except that the body that is deciding whether or not to take his appeal case is like 5 judges who are all black women who historically don't do well with Trump.
You know what, though? More and more people of color are starting, and more women are starting to go to Trump.
They are not. They are not. That is purely propaganda, and they are not.
No.
That doesn't mean that they're going to Biden, but they are not going to Trump, and that is the actual truth. They absolutely are not switching over to Trump. That is a fully fabricated lie. Trump's team is telling you. They're not. There's no way that they are.
No, because I haven't seen this from Trump's team. I've seen it from independent Gallup polls and Pew Research committees that are saying.
Have you heard from a black person?
Yes, I have. On social media, there's tons of people on social media who are people of color saying, you know what, I think I'm going to vote for Trump this year. It's all over. Now, that being said, these are not people. I'll send you TikToks later today, man. But these are not people who are necessarily voting because of race. They're voting because they were already fairly moderate politically. And
okay, I don't want to be the white guy that's
the core issue.
I have black friends, but I have black friends. They're not voting for Trump.
I'm just saying, I have a lot of students who are African American who are coming from families that are 100% Trumpers.
I mean, you also live in Indiana, so.
But it doesn't matter where you live, right? It's the idea.
It does. It kind of. I mean, you're right. It doesn't.
If we're going to talk about a demographic, then it doesn't matter where you live, right? If you're going to talk about
regardless
a geographic, yeah.
Black people as a monolith are not voting for Trump. Now,
I will say
they're
by
not
and large, yeah.
But black people are not voting for Trump.
What I think we're seeing here, what I think this speaks to, and I want to take this back to something you actually said earlier, is a lot of people are becoming more and more disillusioned with both parties.
Yeah.
I know I am
becoming a detestable person. Biden represents the quote unquote corrupt elite that has too much control.
Well, and it's not just that.
A concern, but one, at least in my book, is way worse than the other. Biden's not my favorite person, but a hell of a lot better than the alternatives.
I'm not seeing it come down to a Trump and Biden thing as much as a party thing. I'm seeing a lot of people who grew up Republican saying, I don't know that I'm a Republican anymore. And it's not that I've changed, it's that the party's changed. But I'm also seeing a lot of Democrats say the same thing. Bill Maher has said the same thing, where he's like, I'm not changing, but the party has changed a lot. He still considers himself a Democrat, though. I just saw Jillian Michael.
I would say that.
I mean, I just saw a video of Jillian Michael say, like, hey, I am a lesbian, person who has adopted multiple race kids, who, she goes on this huge spiel of like how she fits into the exact, liberal agenda. And she says, but I left California because it's just not the same place. My positions haven't changed, and we've got a lot of positions that in the state that have changed. And so what I'm thinking we're seeing is
Jillian Michaels has all of the privileges that, and I mean, I'm not going to discount her experience in whatever, minority demographic that she may fit into, but she's also extremely wealthy, extremely successful, also white. So
she's Jewish and Arabic.
Okay, but a lot of the privilege that people who are wealthy have insulates them from the lack of privilege that other people in those same demographics might see.
Right.
So
but what I'm saying
that's why Caitlyn Jenner is not necessarily a champion of trans rights, because Caitlyn Jenner has a hell of a lot of privilege, meaning that she doesn't receive the same treatment that most other people in the trans community receive.
Well, and I bring these examples up simply because they're visible, that people can connect with,
sure.
Right? If I mention people that I've met personally that nobody's going to know who they are, then it means like, okay, well, why do I care that you've met someone who started out one party and is now fairly moderate, But
right.
What I think we're seeing is both parties are buckling down more and more on some of their more extreme bases and views, which is driving some people towards the center, but also leaving a lot of people where they are, and that makes the center widen when you polarize the party stances.
Yeah, I can see that. I think, honestly, I mean, people that were going to vote for Trump before this, or the people that are voting for Trump now, they were always going to vote for Trump. They're what I like to call his cult. There are people that, might have voted for Trump that I think aren't necessarily going to vote for him now. But I mean, I do think that this is really Biden's race to lose. I think that Biden has so far failed to what's the word? Not energize, but
Rally.
yeah, to rally the Democratic base, because I mean, in particular, Israel.
Yeah.
I've been really dissatisfied with his, especially current decisions on that. Although he did get Israel to agree to some kind of a ceasefire. We won't go into that, but
Sure.
I can understand people's frustrations with Biden. And unfortunately, a lot of people, particularly our age, who are liberals, are letting this like one issue that they don't agree with Biden on overshadow the other issues that they don't agree with Biden on, that they should be giving him pressure to change his opinions on, but B, are making them just abstain from voting, which is the worst decision.
Well, and the other problem is you've got the other two candidates who are both running on an America First platform. And so I think a lot of these people who would vote for Biden are going to vote third party or Trump because the other two candidates...
I don't think they're going to vote for RFK or Trump. I do think they're going to vote for like Bernie Sanders, or worse, they're just going to write in ceasefire.
I think that's probably going to happen a lot.
I know, and it's such an idiotic idea. I'm sorry, I need to say that. If you do that, you might as well be voting for Trump. So if you were thinking about doing that, there are other ways that you can get out like your frustration and actually affect what happens in Gaza, rather than tanking the presidential election.
Now, on that note, this goes back to the other thing I wanted to go back to, where you talked about throwing your vote away by voting third party. And I am someone who, for president at least, has exclusively voted third party.
Yeah, and your vote has been wasted. So thank you for your service.
It's interesting that you say that, because of the people that I've had this conversation with, where I've talked about how I have voted third party in every presidential election that I have voted in, which has only been two. Okay. Let's be honest. Let's be clear.
So how did those elections go for you?
Here's the thing. There's two parts to this.
Wait, I want before we go into this, I want you to say, how did those elections go for you?
My candidate didn't win.
Okay, thank you.
But
continue.
Here's the thing. First of all, what I was saying is, everyone else that I've had this conversation with has said, "Oh, so you're the reason we lost."
No.
Right?
No.
And I'm like, no, you're the reason you lost.
I know that you didn't vote for Bernie Sanders. So
no, and my response is, no, the reason you lost is you didn't have a candidate that was good enough to convince me and people like me to vote for you, to vote for your person. Right? Because when Trump ran against Clinton, I voted for Joe Jorgensen. When Biden won against Trump, I voted for... Sorry, no, that's when I voted for Joe Jorgensen. The other time was Gary Johnson.
Right.
Which you want to talk about crackpot weirdos. But
Gary Johnson was a one issue candidate, and it was basically just weed.
No, he also had a lot of taxes. I really liked his tax plans.
But it was also a lot about weed.
It was a lot about weed. That's not why that is true. That's not why I voted for him, though. And so for me, it's saying, I don't like either of these two people, but there is someone who I do kind of like. And as a social studies teacher, as someone who has to convince this group of people, this new upcoming generation, to go out and exercise their right to vote, when I'm hearing them constantly talk about what if I don't like everybody, is I say genuinely, vote your conscience. Vote for who you think would be the best person for the job. And if that's Trump, it's your vote. Vote for Trump. If it's Biden, it's your vote. Vote for Biden. If you think that's the person who's going to do the best job at representing you and your views.
See, that's where I think it's flawed, because I don't think either one of them are the best people for the job. Sure. I do, however, live in reality where I understand it's going to be one of the two.
Yeah.
And so while neither one of them are my favorite, there's definitely one that I would prefer over the other. So I'm going to vote for one of those two because that's nothing is going to change by me voting for like strictly by conscience. What I can do in the meantime, though, which I think is just as important, is be involved in the local elections where the majority of or like more localized elections rather than, just the federal general presidential election, where the majority of the decisions that affect me day to day actually get made. And B is advocate for things like the abolition of the Electoral College, the instatement of things like ranked choice voting, or in some way, which again, I don't think that this is going to happen, but it would at least be better than voting for a third party candidate. Help a third party just gain more prominence.
And so
you're not doing anything by voting for a third party in the presidential election. There are other ways that you can affect that and make third party candidates more valid for upcoming elections. But if you're voting in the presidential election, you have two choices, and not choosing one of those two choices is still making a choice for one of those two choices.
So here's the thing. I completely understand, and to a large degree, agree with what you're saying, that there is the idealistic idea that I've mentioned, and then there's the realistic idea that you've mentioned. The dichotomy of I can vote for someone I want to vote for, knowing that they're probably not going to win, versus I know they're not going to win, so I might as well vote for someone who is realistically going to win and maybe influence that election. And I totally understand that. However, it's the same argument we make when people say, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't matter anyway, right? Either I'm red and I live in a red state.
I have zero respect for those people. I have a little bit of respect for people who vote for third-party candidates. I think it's a dumb choice, but I have respect for them. People who decide that they're not going to vote at all, zero respect.
See, but when we say to people, well, of course it's not going to make a difference because so many of you are saying it doesn't make a difference. If all of you got together and did vote, maybe it would make a difference. And I think if we approach the idea of third, fourth parties the same way we approach people who don't vote altogether, I think that we have a significantly better chance of getting more parties involved on a larger scale. Because
but that's not going to happen.
I think we are closer to it happening than we have ever been because of when you look at the 90s elections with Ralph Nader, where he won a significant amount of the vote to, actually be in debates. When you look at Teddy Roosevelt,
or Ross Perot.
Ross Perot was another one. Teddy Roosevelt ran as a third-party bull moose party and drastically influenced. Like, he's the reason that the person didn't win
almost 100
their re-election,
or almost 200 years ago, wasn't it? It was like 1870s. That was like 150 years ago.
Yeah. Still, it doesn't. But it still doesn't matter because we have the same electoral system, right? The idea that I'm getting at is if enough people change their position
except we don't.
What I'm saying is if enough people change...
It's not just white men that are voting now.
Fair. But what I'm saying is if we get enough people to change their position on third parties to they actually have a chance, and so I should vote for them, both at the local and national level, then I think we actually would have, one, more voter turnout, because people would say, well, if my Green Party candidate actually stands a chance, then I'll go vote Green Party right now. And I think another side of it is just lack of information. A lot of people don't know that there are third parties. Do you know how many Republicans I can think of who would probably vote Constitution Party if they knew that it existed?
A lot of them.
Same with a bunch of libertarians.
I will say most of the Republicans that I know personally are not Trumpers. And if they are voting for Trump, it's just because they don't want to throw away their vote. Or they are throwing away their vote.
Right.
But most of them are what traditionally Republicans are, which goes back to something you were saying earlier. The Republican Party has definitely changed, and I think way more than the Democratic Party. because the Republican Party has been co-opted by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert. They're
co-opted.
not the Republicans that existed. They're not in the same like realm of existence that like George Bush was in.
Yeah, but I think you're going to see I would be interested to see how many of those people are reelected. I think because a one-time election,
I think it's going to be.
I don't know. I don't know.
If Marjorie Taylor Greene cannot be impeached after the stuff that she said, and Matt Gaetz can be a more or less confirmed, if not convicted, but confirmed canoodler with young women who are under the age of 18. Just trying to make sure I don't commit libel or slander. But like if they're still in office this far into their scandals, they're gonna get reelected.
No, I don't think so, because I mean you've got tons of people on both sides who are always saying things, and you got to remember that the politics game is one part actually trying to make an influence and an impact on legislation, and one part trying to make an impact enough in the media that people remember your name when they vote. And because that's most people in federal elections for their representatives and senators vote for the incumbent because that's the name recognition. And so to me, to see someone who gets a lot of media attention, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, if she gets reelected, then that tells me that there's just no one else thinking they could beat her in that local election, or the people.
I think it will have to do with the fact that people know her name,
or people just know her name.
Anyone...
Yeah.
So
she's either going to run unopposed for the Republican seat and win because it's a Republican-heavy district, or she's going to win because of name recognition. If she loses, then I think that shows us that people genuinely, in her district at least, genuinely do care about what she's saying. And I think we've seen that happen with people like Representative Ilhan Omar. She said a lot, and I'm not going to say that what she said was necessarily bad or wrong.
She said some problematic stuff.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I like her. I really do like 90% of her positions. She said some stuff that's at the very least problematic.
Right. And so, and she didn't get reelected, right? And so I think that's what's going to speak more towards this issue is not just did they get elected once, because anybody can get elected once, Anybody can pull the wool. George Santos can get elected once.
I was literally just going to say George Santos got elected in a predominantly blue district.
Right.
Thankfully, he did not last.
Right. And so I think it's if people
that's an example of cancel culture working exactly the way it should be. But also somebody who's doing lucratively or financially very well.
Right. And so I think it'll I'm always a big fan of the wait and see philosophy, where I want, anybody can say and do something. I want to wait and see what happens, because that goes for news stories.
As
that goes for politics.
Men, we have the privilege to wait and see.
Well,
that's
I will
where
say,
I'm coming at it from. Is that I don't want to wait for the repercussions to hit me, because I am the most privileged class of person in almost every single way you could possibly imagine. I don't want to wait for for the consequences of how I vote to hit me before I decide to change that vote.
Here's the thing.
I'm looking at the people who don't have the same privilege that I have, asking them how they're voting, the issues that are important to them. I'm not saying that you don't.
Sure.
But I think
that
the way you and I like just fundamentally view things is different.
I think the reason for that is because of not just our upbringings, but also the paths that we've taken since school, right? So for me, I look at the vast amount of history that we have. And for me, 4 years, that's nothing in the grand scheme of things. We can deal with any president.
That's quite a bit.
See, and this is the difference, right? Because I say 4 years, and a lot can happen in those 4 years, but 4 years, when we look at the grand scheme of how long humans have been around, when we look at how much
Cameron,
has happened.
Hey,
Hold on,
Cameron,
let me finish.
How long did the Civil War last?
Civil War lasted 4 years. And you know what?
I think it was actually 3, wasn't it?
I think, yeah,
Officially?
I think you're right. I think it's somewhere around there.
Do you think that those 3 years changed a little bit?
Hey, what I'm not trying to say is that impact can't happen in those 4 years. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is 4 years is not a long amount of time. And
it's a very short amount of time. We can agree on that. It is also enough time that it can have wide-ranging impacts for centuries. And I mean, I don't have a degree in history, but that also doesn't mean that I'm ignorant of history or that I'm not taking history into account. I'm just not willing to let the seemingly insignificant amount of time that 4 years is stop me from doing the best thing that I can think of today.
That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is time is going to pass, and no matter what happens is going to happen, right? I mean, if one way or another, you can impact what's going to happen, but you can't stop things from happening, right? You can change the course it's on, but you can change what course you're on. You can impact the course that the future will take, but you can't stop the future from happening, is what I mean.
Right.
And so what I mean by that is no matter what, we're along for the ride, right? Whether we're coming from a position of privilege or not, whether we're coming from a position where we are well-to-do or we are not well-to-do, we are all along for the ride that is time.
No, well, I mean, we are, but my point is that whether we can affect the trajectory that we go on, and hindsight is always 20/20. But people that look like you and I and behave like you and I, just demographically, we have Coke bottle glasses, and we're going to be the last people to see that hindsight. Because we're insulated from those ramifications by our privilege.
See, but I would argue, and we could have a whole episode on privilege, because I think views that you would think are interesting on it, in the sense that I think it exists, but I agree
that you would have views that I think are interesting. I don't know that you and I are agreeing on the meaning of interesting, but
sure. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is, I look at the past, and I look at history getting better, always, right? There's ups and downs, there's peaks and valleys, but it's an upward trend. And so for me, I see bad things on the horizon, and I think it's not going to last forever. And when we come out of it, we'll come out of it better than we were before.
Wait, would you say that you see trouble on the way? Oh, sorry. No, I see bad moon. Damn it.
You tried to make a John Fogerty reference and you failed.
I did.
I mean, to answer that facetious question, I'll take that joke seriously and say, yes, I do. I do see trouble on the horizon, and I have seen it for a while. But I also see
Don't come around tonight.
I also see the peak of it, right? Because we've seen very similar troubled times happen before. And I know a lot of people like to compare us to the fall of Rome, and I disagree. I don't think we're going to collapse as a society. I think
I don't think we will either.
Yeah, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, this is the fall of the United States from power," and I don't think we're the Roman Empire. We're not the British Empire. I think
there's a certain timeline that empires, which I think the U.S. could be counted as one.
Absolutely. Oh, we are 100% an empire, and we 100% are part of a cycle.
But it's not. We're not there, but also we're in unprecedented times, so we don't know. With the amount, as fast as we can share information, we don't know the way that geopolitics is going to go from here on out.
We don't, but we can have an educated guess. And
my
educated
guess,
that
educated guess, you have to reconcile the fact that we have unprecedented technology that is exponentially increasing at a rate that we have never ever seen.
Sure. My educated guess on the future, though, is I think no matter who wins this election, I don't think it's going to turn out well for the party that wins. I think you're going to have enough people upset with the fact that no matter who wins, it's a cranky old guy, and nobody really wants that. And so, and so what I think is going to happen is we're going to come out of this election, have 4 years with whoever. I think it's going to be Trump, probably.
Unfortunately, I agree with you.
I would put down money.
It's the problem that I have, though, is the possibility and the explicit stated intention of Trump that it's not just going to be 4 years with him.
I'll believe that when I see it, just because politicians are talk, and not a whole lot of show. They always are.
I mean, him in particular, you're right.
But
also, he talked a lot about like the Stop the Steal stuff before January 6th. I don't think anyone expected January 6th. So it's not so much Trump that I'm worried about. But it's his cohort.
I think what we're going to see, though, is at some point these tensions are going to come to a peak.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that we are nearing the peak, if haven't already passed it.
No, we haven't passed it, and I think that peak is going to be violent.
I don't think so.
I think it's more likely if one party wins over the other, but I do think that maybe not, immediately after this election, but I think that, the sentiments that are growing are not going to simmer down. And within the next, 50 years, I think we'll have a substantial civil conflict, if not significantly sooner.
Oh, I think if we are going to have a civil conflict of some kind, it's going to be in the next 10 to 15.
I would be willing to bet it's probably going to be within that, but who knows?
I also don't think it's going to come to blows. I don't think it's going to go that far.
I don't think it's going to be, civil war. I don't think that it's going to be like, I don't think you and I are going to have to conscript into the, local militia.
Sure.
I do think that there may be, some more happenings like January 6th or, more just, violent conflicts between supporters of one political party and either supporters of the other political party or just the government whose job it is to keep law and order and, may or may not be doing their job well.
I don't know. I think we're going to see some amounts of peak in political tensions. I think it's probably going to happen around...
Is that your dog or is that one mine?
That's my dog. That's my dog scratching himself.
I can only hear through my microphone, so...
But I think we are going to have some amount of political tension that is going to peak probably around the time of the election and maybe another crest around the time of the inauguration. And then I think it's going to maybe hang out there during the next presidency.
Right.
But I think after that, it's probably going to fizzle out. And I think the reason it's going to fizzle out, is because we're seeing with this election a lot more young people being mobilized into voting, whether they're millennials, Gen Z, or Gen Alpha. And those people are going to vote for someone who looks like them.
I see a strong case for what you're saying.
And when you look at the past, where we've seen similar issues, where people are saying, well, this person's too old, doesn't represent me, I don't like how the party's voting. We have voted for younger people. I think
we're done with that after this election.
Well,
I think on both sides, unless Trump loses and then runs again, which I think a third time he's not going to have a chance. But I do think that at least for the general election after this one, we're going to be done with the. Hold on,
that's your dog?
Yeah, but I think she's just barking at.
Okay.
another dog that she hears.
Well, here's what I'm saying is, and then we can end because we've been going for a long time, and this might be a nice civil place to end. But when you look at the order of people that we have and their ages, we tend to get to a series of really old guys, and then the young generation gets mobilized and says, that's not me, I'm not going to vote for that person, and we elect younger people. I mean, if you look, we had FDR, who was kind of up there and super sick. Then we had Truman, and then Eisenhower.
Yeah,
both
he
old
was running.
people.
He was running against Nixon, and then we had Nixon.
Well, no. Hold on, you're skipping ahead. Roosevelt, FDR didn't run against Nixon.
No, I'm talking about Kennedy.
Oh, you're right. But Kennedy won in a huge landslide, and
predominantly because that was the first televised debates.
Sure.
And he looked way better on camera.
Yeah, but
it really had very little to do with actual, policy or anything.
Oh, no, I think it had a lot to do with policy because he really spoke to a lot of what young people at the time wanted, right?
Sure.
And then, of course, Johnson was in because he was the vice president. Right. But then you start getting progressively older people. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan was super old. George Bush Sr., fairly old. People got tired of it, voted for Clinton. And then we've had a series of rather young. George W. Bush wasn't terribly old when he was elected. Neither was Obama.
I think Obama is... Obama is the only one that you can make a case for. George W. Bush not only was not what I would call young, he also had the legacy effect.
Sure, I'm not going to argue he didn't, but George W. Bush was 54 when he was elected. Which,
that's
not that old when we look at...
That's still what I would qualify as an old white man. And I'm sorry for any of my friends who were listening to this and I have just called you old. But if I'm looking at somebody who's running for president and asked to pick out the old white man, chances are if you're 54, I'm going to be pointing at you.
Okay, but what I'm saying is comparatively young.
Yes,
right.
But that's the problem, is that we've gone to the median rather than the mode.
Well, what I'm trying to say is we have a pattern of voting for young people when we get tired of the old people. And I think we're getting tired of the old people. We'll have a young person. And I think that young person is going to calm a lot of the tensions that we're seeing.
Possibly.
That is my educated guess. And if it's not that the person calms a lot of the tensions, I think there's going to be some kind of national tragedy that's going to unite a lot of people behind it.
I certainly hope that that's not the case.
I hope it's not the case too, but historically speaking, that's typically what it's taken, is either a leader is able to bridge a lot of that gap, or
9/11 happens.
Exactly. Or Katrina, or, some huge disaster, or a war. And so, I don't want those things to happen, but looking at the past as at what has ended a lot of these political tensions, that's what's going to happen.
Well, I think that probably brings us to the end.
Yeah, there's nowhere that we can always keep going. And after this, I want to talk to you about some ideas that I've had during this for future episodes.
Yes. Yeah. But I think for now we will have to disagree agreeably.
I agree.
Well, now I disagree.
Screw you.
But anyways, thank you to Halcyon Club for letting us use their song "This Life Is Tough But Fair" off of their EP Headset Emotions. They are working on a new album, and songs are really great. So if you haven't looked up their existing stuff, go do that. And definitely when they release their new stuff, we will keep you updated. Anything you want to add, Cameron?
No, I'm good. I just want to hear your fun fact. You've hyped it up in the part that we edited out.
Yes. The way that you make nacho cheese
Oh God.
is by taking regular cheddar and adding sodium silicate to it, which essentially just draws out the moisture from it and makes it rubbery. The chemical formula for sodium silicate
Dear
is
sweet baby
sodium.
Jesus.
I'm not going to get into the stoichiometry, so I don't have all the subscript numbers, but it's sodium, calcium, hydrogen, and oxygen, which spells out the word nacho.
Which there is no way that you can't look at that and deny the existence of a god, right?
Right, especially because nachos were named after a man named Ignacio, and his nickname was Nacho. The term nacho, existed for this dish before the invention of, nacho cheese.
Right. It's just...
But
and if you already believe in God...
nacho?
And if you already believe in God, because you've already been